mechanism by which individuals internalize political ideologies, reinforcing the hegemonic national identity at the cost of personal and historic truth. In this context, gender violence becomes another significant factor in shaping the consciousness of women during the partition. As Urvashi Butaria notes in her book The Other Side of Silence, that thousands of women on both sides of the newly formed borders were abducted, raped, forced to convert and forced into marriage. This violence, deeply gendered in nature, objectifies women as symbols of community honor, to be either protected or discarded depending on the whims of male protectors. Aisha's transformation from Viru to a Muslim woman named Aisha is a stark reflection of how gender violence and nationalistic ideologies intertwine, leaving women with little agency over their own lives and choices. In this context, Cynthia Enloe suggests that the female body becomes a battlefield where masculinities are constructed and contested through violence. In Khanushmani, Aisha's loss of autonomy over her own body becomes the foundational trauma that later shapes her consciousness. Next slide. The issue concerning the partition violence raised questions about being a Hindu, Muslim or a Sikh. Plurality of identity is often devalued in the midst of communal violence in order to objectify a particular target group, be it a Muslim, Hindu or a Sikh community. One has to have certain choices in matters of identity, as Amartya Sen writes in Identity and Violence that, and I quote, "Indeed, the denial of plurality as well as the rejection of choice of matters of identity can produce an astonishingly narrow and misdirected view. At the same time, a person can be Hindu, a Dalit, refugee, father, a child, farmer, a poet, an environmental activist, and a martyr. The partition violence forces individuals to choose between religious identities, completely disregarding the complexity of personal histories. In the case of Aisha, her conversion to Islam after being subjected to violence and rape raises question about the fluidity of identity. Is Aisha a Muslim, a Sikh, or a mother? To reduce her identity to a singular religious label would be to ignore the plurality that constitutes her being. The film challenges the reductionism, emphasizing that the multiplicity of identities cannot be neatly contained within the boundaries of nationalism or religious orthodoxy. The well, now we come to the well that was there since the beginning. The well, which serves as both a literal and metaphorical space in the narrative, embodies the idea of identity's fragmentation as well as the well of consciousness. As Viru, when she was Viru, she is forced to jump into the well. However, she emerges from the well as Aisha, where her identity is reconstituted by the violence that she experiences. The well thus symbolizes the inescapability of traumatic memory. It is both a site of death and rebirth, a place where the struggle between forgetting and remembering takes place. Regarding partition, Isma Chugtai once stated, I quote, "The bonds of relationship were in tatters, and in the end, many souls remained behind in Hindustan while their bodies started off to Pakistan." Next slide. However, it is Zubeda, the narrator, who brings Viru or Aisha's story back into the collective consciousness. Zubeda questions at the end if it is ever possible to answer who left and who stayed back in Turkey. And There is one particular line where we see Zubaida saying, so this is how Zayd left and Aisha stayed behind. Do we know who left and who stayed? This rhetorical question highlights the ambiguity of identity after partition and points to the tension between public and private memories. In conclusion, Khamosh Pani presents a profound examination of how partition's trauma is inscribed into individual consciousness, particularly through the experience of women. The film's exploration of memory, identity, and gendered violence offers a nuanced perspective on the psychological scars left by partition, which persist long after the event itself. Through the recurring motif of the well, the film critiques the notion of a singular national identity, advocating instead for the recognition of plural identities and the voices that have been silenced by history. Khamosh Pani thus reveals that the partition of India is a trauma without terminal. It is a trauma without a terminal, a trauma that cannot be sealed because the wounds are always reopened. No matter how much the state and the nation state tries to erase the private narratives of the silent waters, narratives that are embedded into wells of consciousness. Thank you.
Thank you, Shalini. I think it will be a good idea to take the questions at the end together for the speakers. So, reminded me a little bit about the predicament of Gora, in Tagore's novel by the same name. So, okay, we'll take the questions at the end together. And thank you for that analysis of partition, trauma, memory, and latent consciousness. I'd now like to invite Dr. Sharmishta Dutt to come on stage. Since the titles are not mentioned, please briefly introduce yourself.
Yes, good afternoon. Can you take the first slide, please, the title? It's not coming. You just look at the. So it says unraveling the consciousness and self-realization in Paramahansa Yogananda's autobiography of yogi. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dr. Sharmishta Dutt, and I will be talking on a topic which is more of aesthetic and spiritual. Well, I was enjoying a previous speaker's paper presentation, being a partition scholar myself. But that apart, let me get back to the topic that I've been assigned to for today. Now, it's a very complex and vast topic or a vast area, which is mysticism, and there are so many keywords to be noted here: mysticism, self-consciousness, and self-realization. So, and it is also unraveling. So I will take the topic one by one, but I will go with one seminal text. Just go to the introduction slide, please. Yes. So I will just take reference with one seminal text for discussing what is mysticism, what is consciousness, and how consciousness is unraveled, and how self-realization is achieved with the help of one text, which is Paramahansa Yogananda's autobiography of a yogi. Though there are other texts as well, but I keep this text as because this text serves as a seminal spiritual text. And with the key themes of mysticism, self-realization, and consciousness, the book itself serves to bridge a gap between the Eastern philosophy and the Western seekers. Now, what is consciousness? Consciousness per se, we can think about it like that. It refers to the state of being aware of oneself. Now, how to achieve that state awareness, how to achieve the state, that conscious state, Yogananda refers to us as being self-aware is through yoga, and then only we can achieve it. We can talk about self-realization maybe, right? So, understanding mysticism, next slide please. Understanding mysticism in Yogananda's narrative. So, here we can just take what about the definition of mysticism. What is mysticism? These are very, very deep and intricate thoughts, but to club it up, we can just take that it refers to direct personal experience with the divine, which transcends intellectual understanding, sometimes logical understanding as well. Now, how, next slide please, mysticism as a transformative journey. So, with reference to this Yogananda's autobiography of a yogi, in the book we find that it talks about the yogi's life as the whole life as a seeker and his path to enlightenment, and how he explores the various facets of life to achieve enlightenment, though he says that he's yet to achieve them. And that achievement, in that achievement, the role of meditation, the role of yoga plays a very important part. So the role of meditation and spiritual discipline in unveiling these deeper realities has been discussed deeply in the book. So, mystical states and superconsciousness, what Yogananda in his book tries to unravel is the experiences that go beyond the ordinary perception, such as the samadhi, which is a deep, spiritual absorption, and also the connection between mystical experiences and self-realization. As I was talking, how he tries to bridge in order to for achieving the state of self-realization, how you to undergo the mystical experience. Enlightened masters. So, from his childhood description to how his journey, Yogananda talks about learning from spiritual figures such as Sri Yukteswar Giri, Navini Mahasaya, and Mahavatar Babaji. Though Yukteswar Giri was, of course, the guru of Yogananda's parents as well, so it's from the lineage that he has taken that. So, the family guru, which of course then he talks how each master represents a different aspect of mystical wisdom and divine realization. So, consciousness, we can go to the next slide, the consciousness and the self, which is the main topic, the theme. Consciousness and the self in Yogananda's philosophy is the unity of individual consciousness with the divine. Now, we all have this or aspire to be one with the divine, that is our ultimate, and that is how we have to raise our consciousness, be conscious that we are one with the divine. So the self is not limited, according to Yogananda, to the physical body or ego, but is an extension of the universal consciousness. So we have to be one, our physical individual consciousness have to be one with the individual consciousness. That is what Yogananda is stating. And also his own experiences of transcending the ego through meditation. He talks about how he has achieved to overcome the ego and transcend the ego through meditation. That is, it talks about one specific yoga practice, which is the Kriya Yoga, and then he also describes the role of yoga and meditation in our daily lives, and how through the practice of Kriya Yoga one can overcome and achieve the sense of belonging, the individual becoming the one with the universe and transcending the ego. Now, next slide. Consciousness and the self in Yogananda's philosophy. This is then we have the scientific and philosophical perspectives of consciousness. Now, he also talks about the comparisons between mystical insights and modern neuroscience, the concept of consciousness as a field beyond the individual perception. So it goes to reach the universal oneness. So the philosophical implications of Yogananda's teaching is basically based on selfhood and self-awareness. So the Hindu, next slide please. The Hindu philosophy and the yogic discipline talks about the core tenets of Hindu thought in Yogananda's teaching. What are those? One is the karma, which is the law of cause and effect, and the dharma, that is one's duty and righteous path leading to spiritual fulfillment, and moksha. These are the three stages, which is karma, dharma, and moksha, which is liberation from the cycle of birth and death. And ultimately, we reach to self-realization if we pass on through these stages of karma, dharma, and moksha, which is very difficult to practice and also very difficult to realize in this digital age, but we must not negate it. That is what he says of Advaita Vedanta and the nature of the self. The philosophy of the non-dualism, that is Advaita, teaches that the individual self, Atma, is identical to the supreme reality, which is Brahma. So Atma is identical to Brahma. This is when, that is also the consciousness, is when me, I become one with the universe. So Yogananda's teaching align with this by emphasizing the dissolution of personal identity in divine consciousness. Next slide please. Now then he talks about the most, which is scientifically proven, according to Yogananda, scientifically proven tool for self-realization is through meditation, and that meditation through Kriya Yoga, which is passed on to the gurus like Yukteswar, Lahiri Mahasaya, Yukteswar, and Babaji, Mahavatar Babaji. So this Kriya Yoga is a specific yogic practice which is taught by Yogananda, which of course, as I said, is he has carried on from the legacy of his predecessor gurus, and this is designed, this specific Kriya Yoga is designed to accelerate spiritual growth. Now Kriya Yoga involves breath control, meditation and devotion to achieve deeper states of awareness. And this technique is seen as a bridge between the individual effort and divine grace, fostering direct experiences of higher consciousness. At this point, one might obviously argue that there are other forms of meditation also. Why Kriya Yoga? So in the book, Paramahansa actually articulates and elucidates why Kriya Yoga and how you can, with the practice of Kriya Yoga, how you will be achieved oneness with the universe, and what is the path to conscious self-realization, consciousness and self-realization. So, next slide please. Integration of yogic discipline into daily life. So there are basic teachings which he has given is balancing spiritual practices with worldly responsibilities. He is not asking everyone to become a yogi, become an ascetic, leave the familial duties. He is all asking to balance the spiritual practices with thereby performing the worldly responsibilities as well. Now, the role of ethical living, self-discipline and devotion in the pursuit of enlightenment is what is also, emphasized by Paramahansa Yogananda in his book, The Autobiography of a Yogi. So his book, his teachings provide a structured approach to inner transformation. Now we hear a lot about inner engineering nowadays. So Yogananda has talked a lot, much before, about the same inner transformation through this yogi practice, which is Kriya Yoga. Now next slide please, which talks about, now this is again some illustration in the book, which is the supernatural elements and their symbolism, which is the power of Kriya Yoga. He talks about the power of Kriya Yoga and his encounters with saints and miracles, talks about some supernatural miracles which has happened, and it's all leading to how and why we should practice Kriya Yoga, and we should practice meditation, and what role does meditation play in our daily lives. So the significance of supernatural experiences in spiritual literature and how these elements challenge empirical knowledge. Sometimes these supernatural elements go beyond the logical reasoning and understanding. So they challenge the empirical knowledge, which is our what we see and believe. It sometimes goes beyond that. So, next slide please, the role of devotion and self-realization. So, Yogananda talks of bhakti, surrender, and comparison. These are the three ways to achieve self-realization. One is bhakti as a path to the divine, where devotion is a way to cultivate love for the divine and dissolve the evil. So Yogananda's personal devotion for his Guru, Sri Yukteswar, is emphasized. So, and also he talks about how you can attain bhakti with unbiased devotion, and then complete surrender. So the importance of surrendering the ego to experience the higher state of consciousness. Sometimes you need to reach beyond the reason, logical reasoning. Surrender. Why? Sometimes we have to stop questioning. Because it is our Guru, we cannot question the Guru. So why it is happening? Why this? Stop that. Surrender. That is what he says. In order to achieve that state of self-realization, and also comparison with other spiritual traditions, parallels between Bhakti Yoga, Christian mysticism, and Sufi traditions. It's trying to integrate or find an interrelation between these other Eastern and Western traditions, where he has also talked about how Christianity is also talking the same, mystical experience of self-realization and consciousness. So, next slide please. Now the mystical and empirical knowledge, the tension between the faith-based mysticism and rational inquiry. So nowadays with with the digital generation coming up, we always try to question the supernatural powers, question the mysticism, question the natural elements. That tension between faith-based mysticism, can mystical experiences be scientifically studied really? This is wrong. And the challenge of validating subjective spiritual experiences. So you have to validate, there is a tendency to validate. So being conscious is not just validating the experiences,